Welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries, the podcast where we discuss the poetry of Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning. No, seriously. Book number 17, Love Letters.
Is Caroline's romance for real?
It's very sexy.
So what does that mean? Miss America?
Hi, I am your host, Marissa Flaxbart, and welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries. Welcome to my guest as well, Jeremy Shattuck. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, hello.
Jeremy and I are here in a very echoey room in a beautiful Venice manse in Venice, California, where Jeremy is staying for a while. Thanks for having me over, Jeremy.
You're welcome. Welcome.
And we are here today to discuss a really, really special, magnificent book called Love Letters.
An important piece of literature.
Yes. So, Jeremy, now that you've read book number 17, you're going to keep up and read all the way through till the end, right?
Yeah, I'm addicted now. I need to know what happens to some of these characters. I realized it was a serial, so I'm sucked in.
So my first question that I ask every guest is whether or not you'd ever read a Sweet Valley High novel or heard of Sweet Valley High before you read this book.
No, I definitely have never read, and I don't think I've ever heard of it. Besides, of course, from your podcast.
Right. Let's start by talking about the cover of the book. Can you describe it?
I'm assuming what is Caroline reading what'll be the inciting incident here, or the thing that starts her journey in this book.
Yeah, so we've got Caroline Pierce, famous gossip queen of Sweet Valley High, to those people that have been listening along or reading along or remember reading these books. Caroline Pierce is famously like a huge gossip. She has this shoulder length red hair, and she's eagerly looking at a piece of paper, like really excited. And behind her, looking over her shoulder,
I believe is Elizabeth, who is looking very questioningly at this piece of paper she has.
That is a good call. I didn't know. I also think it's Elizabeth. Because Jessica dresses in a much more fashionable way than Elizabeth. And this girl has the sort of long sleeves. They're both wearing pale yellow, the same color as the cover of the book, which is an interesting choice. But I love...
It's almost flesh tone.
I love the look on Elizabeth's face in this cover. I just want to zoom in on it. And it's she is highly suspicious. What do you think?
Yeah, but I guess in that same... in the same way, it could be Jessica, because she's the one, of course, who is, pondering whether Caroline is for real.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, and why I was I'm glad that you can tell that it's Elizabeth. Jessica is highly suspicious of Caroline in this book, and Elizabeth is just kind of also maybe a little bit, but not really. She's not really involved in that story until the end, but...
Yeah, and I could see as more of a quietly judging... Caroline from behind her, perhaps.
So Caroline Pierce is the star of this book, the A story. Do you have first impressions of Caroline as a character?
I would say she doesn't really seem to have any personal hobbies.
Yeah.
Or as far as what she's into. Yeah,
she's really into typewriting.
Yeah, and I guess this was written in the 80s, so... it was before computers. It's a little less,
There have been
that would be more a little hipster if she was in her room with her typewriter.
Yeah, there have been a few appearances of computers in this series, but they're always a little bit comical, kind of newfangled, for sure. Mm-hmm. So she is also obsessed with trying to impress her older sister. That could be a hobby for Caroline.
Yeah, that's true.
She's got an older sister
yes.
She's got an older sister named Anita. And Anita has never appeared in the series before this book. So as much about Anita as anybody knows from having read this book. She's a cool, kind of cool older girl, but not in the sort of stereotypical popular way. She seems sort of well-rounded, and it's almost as if she looks down on Caroline because she knows that Caroline's awful or something.
Yeah,
she has some sort of secret insight to...
I think she's waiting for a sister to develop a personality or something. Or, interests besides, being a gossip. And liking boys from afar.
Right. Well, in the last book, we heard a little bit about Caroline and her boyfriend Adam and these love letters that she was getting from Adam. And so that is the subject of this book. And this book does not keep us in suspense.
No, not at all.
We find out on the first or second page of the book that Adam is not real. And what's so interesting to me about this book, having read about Caroline for many books now, is that we start this book suddenly from her perspective, and we're granted all of this understanding about where she's coming from. Why is she such a gossip? And what we learn about Caroline is that she is super socially awkward, and she is only a gossip because it's her only way that she can think of to have anything to contribute to any conversation. Mm-hmm. And over again in this book, she muscles her way into a conversation by saying oh, did you hear what so-and-so said about so-and-so? But everybody else in Sweet Valley is so over Caroline that as soon as she starts saying shit like that, they just roll their eyes. They're oh, this is Caroline being Caroline. Go away.
Well, I think everyone, I think at the beginning of the book, everyone avoids her. I don't think there's a single character who likes Caroline.
Not even Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So let's get there real quick. I highlighted some quotes to kind of set things up from the very first chapter, very, very beginning of the book. We have Caroline thinking to herself, maybe I'll never be as popular as the Wakefield twins or Lila Fowler, but I'm not going to be an outcast anymore. All that has changed now with Adam.
Thanks to Adam, people are actually starting to pay some attention to me.
It was funny, Caroline thought as she jumped out of bed and hurried over to her dresser. All it seemed to take to get in with the right people was a boyfriend. And an invented boyfriend seemed to work as well as the real thing.
Right.
And that, I think, is when we find out that Adam is invented. So she's been typewriting these very poetic, beautiful love letters. Listeners, if you haven't listened to episode 16, we read toward the end of that episode a beautiful selection from one of these letters. Very poetic. And so she starts out, and we learn right away, though, that she has this other motivation, which is that her sister also doesn't pay attention to her. And she has this thought I can't wait to really get Anita's attention for real. And then she has this weird thought, I wish Anita, who goes to college nearby, I wish she didn't live at home anymore. It was just the pressure of trying to live up to her sister, who is a much more functional human being, is just too much.
But better to not be in high school with her sister, as she mentions.
Yeah, she does say that. At least now they're not in school together, so she's not constantly trying to live up to her sister's level of just kind of natural popularity, or just not having to struggle. So that's very relatable in a weird way.
Yeah, I think, of course, I think she sees Anita as actually a person, as we were discussing, maybe. Versus, when I grow up, I want to have a personality and interests, and...
Just like my sister.
Just like my sister, yeah.
So, right away, at the beginning of this book, we get to see Elizabeth also not like Caroline, just like everybody else doesn't. Because, so we start with Caroline, thinking about how much better life is going, really the day after the last book ends. There's a big party for Roger Patman at a country club, and, Caroline comes home still just electric from all the attention that she got at the party. And, listeners, the scene that we read in the last episode was the scene I'm talking about to kind of set up this book. So you got to see kind of the aftermath of that, Jeremy, that she's really excited about telling everybody about Adam. So she's going to go get a ride with the Wakefields to the beach, she says. And it gets really sad really quick after this.
Yeah, I believe that she tells, what is it? She's talking to her mom, right?
Yeah.
And she says that she's going with the Wakefields to the beach and going in their car, I believe, that they're picking her up.
Yeah, and the mom is oh, wow.
Yeah, and even Anita, her sister, is oh, those Wakefield twins, really, I forget what she says, really, go-getters in some way, oh, what great twins they are.
Yeah, Caroline purposefully mentions that she's getting a ride with the Wakefield twins because she knows that Anita will be impressed, because Anita really thinks the Wakefield twins are neat girls. And she goes over to their house. They're neighbors, by the way. The book doesn't make that clear. But the Wakefields and the Pierces are neighbors. And she knocks on the door, and Jessica, sees her coming and hides and makes Elizabeth, lie to Caroline about the fact that she's still asleep. And Elizabeth is not much nicer to Caroline. Caroline tries to convince her to come to the beach, too. by saying like, oh, your boyfriend Todd will be there. And Elizabeth is immediately just like thinking the worst of everything that comes out of Caroline's mouth. Like what's she trying to insinuate? That I can't have a life without Todd?
Yeah, pretty much.
And this is where we get the first plant for what I would call like the B or C story, D story of this book, which is that Elizabeth is working on a play.
Right. Yeah, because isn't that what her excuse is when she goes over? It's like, come to the beach with me, Elizabeth. And she's like, no, I have to wash my cat. Or in this case, I'm writing my play.
She really means it, though. Like, she's scrambling to try to finish the play.
I didn't get that from it. I think it was, she's definitely writing her play, but I think it was an excuse at that point. I kind of see, like, she's probably almost done at this point.
I guess we do later find out that Elizabeth has left the house to go hang out with Todd, so clearly she wasn't that serious about working on the play all day.
She wasn't that busy. I think she said she was I have so much research to do or something like that.
So poor Caroline takes the bus to the beach and seeks out the meanest girls in school, Jessica, Lila, and Kara, who are all there. And they're very mean to her. And Kara goes away to talk to some other girls on the beach. And Jessica immediately starts doing a mean impression of Kara. Like, she's baited into it. Lila, I'm sorry, I'm saying Kara. Caroline. Lila, because there's also a character named Kara. So
okay.
Kara, Lila, Jessica are together. They're like a trio. Caroline walks away and Lila's like,
to
Caroline
see Maria,
impression.
I believe.
Yeah, Maria Santelli. She's got to talk to Maria Santelli about Ricky Capaldo and Annie Whitman.
Oh yeah. Got to do some gossip. I think that's the first time we hear gossiping in this book.
Yeah, we hear, and she launches right into it. Again, she's trying to have something to say in the conversation. She finds that whenever she turns the conversation back to Adam, these popular girls are genuinely interested in her. So she's leaning on that. What she doesn't know is that the popular girls are highly suspicious. I don't know where she got that bathing suit. She's wearing a tank suit.
Oh, right.
I don't know where she got that bathing suit, Kara giggled. It looks like something you'd wear for gym class. Lila nodded. She sure didn't meet this Adam guy at the beach, she agreed. Though where she did meet him is a good question. He must have a few screws loose if he's serious about Caroline. Maybe he's nearsighted, Kara said. He'd have to be nearsighted and hard of hearing to tolerate even 5 minutes with her, Jessica pointed out. It's her voice that drives me crazy. No wonder they have to depend on letters. It's so terrible. And then Jessica does this imitation of her.
I mean,
the reason I'm bringing up Jessica is doing this mean impression of Caroline, because what she's saying is very innocuous, but she's basically just repeating what Caroline just said, is that Caroline is behind Jessica. Lila's no, she's trying to signal to Jessica, no, stop. Which is only important because it inspires Caroline to retaliate. She's mad. She knows that Jessica is making fun of her and she feels powerless. So she throws the only piece of dirt that she has against Jessica in Jessica's face, which is this piece of paper that she's found outside Wakefield's house earlier.
Is it a sketchy moment? Yes. And I suppose we maybe should have said on her way to the beach, right?
Yeah, outside the Wakefield's house.
I believe it's a dog knocked over a trash can.
And there's a photocopy.
And not only a photocopy, a dark photocopy. It's very mysterious.
He does say that, a dark photocopy of a letter from Mrs. Wakefield, Alice Wakefield, to a design firm in San Francisco saying, I've considered your offer. It will take me at least a month to get my family together to move to a new city, but making it sound like the Wakefields are going to move to San Francisco. So Caroline says something to Jessica, very biting, I know it must be hard to keep your composure, what with the big move coming up. And Jessica's like, what are you talking about? And it's this is just another unsubstantiated rumor from you, Caroline. And Caroline is like, ha, evidence. Exactly. Here's the paper. And she shows it to Jessica. And Jessica immediately makes up an excuse to leave and go home to confront her parents. But nobody's home because Elizabeth has gone out with Todd somewhere. But eventually the Wakefields come home. And this is the big B story of the book, is that the Wakefields Mr. and Mrs. Wakefield are considering moving away from Sweet Valley to San Francisco.
Yeah, it sounds. Why would you ever want to move away from Sweet Valley? It sounds like the best place.
Well, that's exactly what Elizabeth and Jessica think.
Absolutely. Most popular, or some of the most popular girls in school.
Yeah. So this general plot has nothing to do at all with the main plot. So we can pretty much sum it up by saying the Wakefield twins hatch a big plan to keep their parents in town. The plan is multifaceted, but among other things, they go to the city hall and like sign their this like civic center and sign their parents up for every mailing list. So
all the tourism pamphlets they could possibly ever get, which I didn't realize Sweet Valley was such a tourist destination.
Apparently they've got a lot of pamphlets.
Apparently you can get a lot of stuff sent to you. So.
And boy, was the lady at the tourism office excited to have somebody signed up on a list for every pamphlet.
So maybe they're just a really overfunded an under-visited tourism office.
And then they
my God, here, have my 2,000 pamphlets. I will mail them to your parents. You're welcome.
Like, maybe do they want every copy? Because we really have a lot of extras. And then they try to take their parents to all the best restaurants in town.
Where they got engaged. And the
Tiberino's?
Fat, I believe they refer to him as a fat, jolly Italian man.
Probably. This book is pretty racist.
Yeah.
Tiberino's. There's like Vito's. The twins prepared this like special dinner to apologize to their mom for having lashed out.
As confusing as a scene. All right, so yes, they're apologizing to their parents for lashing out about this possible move.
Yeah,
but it's like, oh yeah, we cooked you dinner. Here is takeaway we got from your favorite restaurant.
Yeah, it
was very confusing. Like what? The whole house smells like food, I think they say. Like, oh, what did you cook?
And then it turns out they didn't cook at
It's
all.
some takeout.
They got, like, takeout veal from the Italian place.
Takeout veal sounds a little sketchy.
It really does.
It's been, and I believe he says it's been a long time since we've gotten takeout veal.
From this particular place,
confuses me.
Which is called Uncle Vito's or something.
Yeah.
And then there's like a flower arrangement, and Elizabeth's like, "Oh yes, I got it from the place is called Pedal Pushers," which I remembered because it was such a fabulous pun, and we've never heard of it before. So, I got them from Pedal Pushers. They always have the best flowers, don't you think? So that's kind of the whole. They're basically like, "Oh, remember this place? Isn't this a great place?
Buttering
boy, it sure will be sad when we don't have this place anymore." And like Jessica entices her dad to come out to this big canyon by saying the car is broken down, but the car, of course, is not broken. And when he shows up, it starts up with no problem. And she's like, I don't know what happened. And they're just trying to inspire this sense of, how their fondness. Apparently the Wakefields grew up in Sweet Valley and have never lived anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. So trying to keep them there and inspire them to love all these things because they're apparently workaholics.
Yeah, I guess so. And yeah, it's actually interesting. Ned Wakefield really yells at Jessica for being angry that they might move. And I think it's the first time we've ever really seen him be this mean to his daughters. But he has like no patience. He's like, your mom has worked really hard for this. You need to be grateful, or you need to congratulate her and be happy for her. But it is like their junior year of high school. And I couldn't help but think, like, couldn't Alice say, like, hey, if there's an opening for me in a year and a half, like, all of my kids will be out of the house. Right, and it would not uproot anybody to move. There's a weird...
So it was like, what, they're like in a month or something?
Yeah. Right. There's a weird line that Ned Wakefield has where he suggests that somehow it would be like more affordable for them to live in San Francisco. Did you notice that? It was really a mindfuck.
Well, I mean, if Sweet Valley is such a coveted tourist destination, I would always assume 80s San Francisco, as a very different place in the 80s, it could be cheaper than Sweet Valley. Yeah. I mean, you hear them talking about how amazing the school is at least once in this book.
Yeah.
Oh, Mom, and that's exactly the buttering up thing. Hey, Mom and Dad, how could you ever want to leave Sweet Valley? It's the best schools. Yeah. They even have a playwright.
Yeah, did you know that this is the only school in the state that's doing this play competition? Yeah. Oh, we're so lucky to go to Sweet Valley High. They think they're pulling one over on their parents by doing this, like, very sly, sneaky thing. And, like, even though we're nowhere near the end of the book and the 8th story, like, might as well spoil this plot now. Guess what? The Wakefields don't leave Sweet Valley. The Wakefield twins, the star of the Sweet Valley High series, they stay in Sweet Valley. They don't move to San Francisco at all. Oh, are you surprised? Did I spoil the series for you?
I'm not surprised, but I feel really they could have reinvented themselves in San Francisco.
Yeah. Well, I realize now that I've asked you that, you did read the book, so you knew what happened in this plot.
Do indeed.
Okay, so let's get back into Caroline.
Mm-hmm. Caroline.
Basically, chapter after chapter of this book is Caroline getting increasingly stressed out about the fact that she has to keep on creating these letters. And the popular girls, especially Lila, for some reason, are really pushing her to invite Adam to come to Sweet Valley.
Right, which I think is interesting, too, in the beginning, because you have all these girls who really don't like Caroline, but they're very interested in this guy, which is like, I don't know, it's interesting, right? Like, why are they so interested in this person they dislikes love affair or man she met out of town?
Yeah. Well, that was part of why I was wondering about your first impression of her, because you didn't have the benefit of the previous books where we know that Caroline is kind of an, like, the books lay it on pretty thick that nobody really likes Caroline, and for good reason, even Elizabeth. But this book starts from her perspective, so we kind of feel for her, right?
Right. Yeah, her strange thought process of, popularity, which, made me wonder as a male, is this what it's like to grow up as a young woman?
I mean, sometimes, I think.
Tell me now, because I'm very curious. I even wrote it here in my notes. Is this what it's like to be a young woman? See, there it is.
Aw. Well, that makes me feel like this podcast is doing some important work, because I think on some level, it kind of is. Like, it's easy for me as a woman in my 30s now to look back on Caroline, like, thinking, if only I had a boyfriend, I would be popular, and being like, oh, sweetie, like, no, this is a terrible example for young girls. But the thing is, like, when you are in high school and you're kind of lonely, as Caroline is in this book, it's easy to think, like, basically anything that I can do to, get myself some kind of positive attention or seem like I'm important or like I matter, like, yeah, that can be a pretty big deal. And, like, social status can be a pretty big deal. So on some level, I think it is. Hopefully, I think the social awkwardness probably a lot of listeners like write in if you have a memory of this book. But like, I think a lot of young women, I can imagine relating to Caroline because she feels so lonely. And she doesn't just want the approval of her peers. She wants the approval of her sister. So there is something that she does early on relating to Adam that she does for the benefit of her sister, which is that she hasn't told her sister about Adam yet, and she wants to really do it in a way for maximum impact. So she stages this phone call.
The phone call, yeah.
Where, like, she sees her sister's coming home, and she, like, times it so that she's, like, secretly on the phone with him, and she tells him that she loves him, and, like, oh, thank you so much for your letter, and it works like a charm.
Right, she lays it on thick, as I recall.
Yeah. I have a quote in chapter 5 here.
Nice.
Under ordinary circumstances, Anita would have gone right through the living room into the kitchen without even noticing her sister. But when she heard Caroline talking to a boy, she slowed down and actually gave her sister a smile. She went into the kitchen, but Caroline could tell she was still listening. It was exactly what Caroline had hoped for. Now that it was actually happening, she was ecstatic. It was definitely worth it. All the lying, the deception. She didn't care that Adam didn't even exist. The only thing that mattered was that Anita was paying attention to her. And she'd even given her little sister an encouraging smile.
Right, I forgot about the smile. Yeah, she walks by and smiles at her.
This is the part that is sad, and, like, I hope is not a normal part of a young girl's experience, although it may have been even more often in the 80s, is that Anita, it's kind of like until Caroline has this fictitious validation from a boy, Anita is, like, unwilling to, like, help her sister out. After this, Anita starts to take an interest in Caroline by, like, helping her style her hair and, like, pick out an outfit, and is a little bit like, Caroline has to tell herself, like, but this is all because of Adam. Adam doesn't even really exist. And then she's got to, like, shake that thought off and be like, it doesn't matter. Like, her attention is worth whatever it takes. It's so sad.
Yeah.
It's pitiful.
It is. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all that attention she wants from her sister, which is a little confusing. I mean, obviously she wants some sort of acceptance or I'm kind of wondering where the family is for this whole thing. Like, very cold relationship with her mom and her sister, apparently, in this book.
I don't know if she has a dad
seems like she wants a sister. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Her mom, never appears. Yeah.
I think her mom is in one scene.
Yeah.
She comes in and says hi.
And she does do what I have to say can be a kind of a typical mom thing to do, which is just like, oh, like, have you been talking to any nice boys lately? Oh, have you been hanging out with any of those nice girls lately? Like, she's like kind of trying to encourage your daughter to like go out there and like have a nice life, but like the way that you're doing it is like poking at all of her wounds. That's a pretty typical mom-daughter dynamic.
I definitely see it. And I think there's absolutely that moment too with even her sister Anita saying, oh, how come mom doesn't even know about Todd? You didn't tell mom about Todd?
Or about Adam.
Or Adam, excuse me. And that's an interesting moment of, hey, look, like, apparently the mom is around, but not really.
Yeah. And Caroline, I don't think ever does Anita tell her mom.
Get along, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe Anita gets along with mom, and Caroline is just... No wonder Caroline's so lonely. Mom and Anita are always out at, like, mommy-daughter brunches or something.
Hugging and like, loving each other. And
their mom, Mrs. Pierce, is like, oh, yes, I here's my only daughter, Anita. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I mean, my elder daughter.
Yeah. The other one's not old enough to have developed a personality yet. So,
yes. We have high hopes for her. Maybe college will be good for her. So, a really important driver for this story comes in the form of I can't believe I'm saying this, but the poets Robert and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And this is where I'm actually sort of proud of the book for tying these storylines together at all. Because you've got Elizabeth's play. Mm-hmm. Do you remember what it was called? We find out at the end of the book that it was called One Woman's Romance.
Oh, yes.
Which I thought that was kind of an evocative title. Yeah. And also shows how there is this like thematic.
Yeah, it was on the nose for sure. It was a little writer's hand of Yeah,
because Caroline, of course, that is literally one woman's romance and nobody else's.
When I think Caroline. If we were to hear Elizabeth's play, it would be an expression of that, because obviously it's about the love letters, so it is one woman's romance all the way around. So
so historically
you're totally correct.
It's really more artful than these books tend to be, even if it is, like you said, like thematically a bit on the nose. So Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning are, real historical poets that were, both famous poets in their own right and have this great history of, writing these beautiful letters to each other and also love letters love poems that they wrote to each other that, were later published, under these like weird, like secret titles, like Elizabeth Barrett Browning's, one book of poems to Robert Browning was published as, Sonnets from the Portuguese. Which is true. That's a true story of a real book of poems. But it's important because, as we've said before, Caroline's letters from Adam have this real flowery, poetry in them.
Absolutely. And do you know, are these actual direct quotes, or is
I think they are. They are.
I was curious if, the author had directly quoted, or they were like, oh, this sounds, so similar.
So we learned that what Caroline has done is she has checked out these books of poetry from the library, and she's not directly quoted them. She's just like taken pieces of them out of context and woven them together in these other sentences, purposefully trying to cover her tracks. There's a scene where she goes to the library and the librarian is like, oh, you're the one that's been checking out all the Browning, like...
Well, I think she goes to the library and, oh, hey, you've been checking out all this, but you're not the only one.
Yeah. And so Caroline doesn't really know what's going on.
Important part of our A-plot, for sure.
It makes her nervous. What? And meanwhile, we've got Elizabeth writing this play, and part of the process is that she has to read it out loud, and she wants to read it to her family.
Right.
And so at school, we've got Caroline reading her letters or having them read by the popular girls, by Lila, Kara, and Jessica. Then at home, Jessica is hearing Elizabeth read her own play out loud. And there's some passage from one of the letters that Jessica recognizes. And she's like, Elizabeth, wait, read that again. And Elizabeth's like, wait, are you actually paying attention to my play?
Right. She doesn't paint Jessica as necessarily that nice of a person.
No.
Or maybe maybe that's not fair, and Jessica is just not into the arts. She totally has reasons to not like
I would
Caroline.
say.
I feel like, Caroline hasn't done anything very nice for anyone.
No, and Jessica is definitely pretty angry at Caroline for being the person to like bring up this whole San Francisco thing, even though Caroline was right. Jessica could more charitably think like, oh, well, if it hadn't been for Caroline, I would never have had the opportunity to like wage this counterattack on my parents to try to get them to not move. But that's not what Jessica thinks. So Jessica is immediately like, this bitch, like, I am going to get her. Like, I know what's happening. She does not make the assumption that some other people make, which is, oh, Adam's not really a poet. He's copying from Browning.
Right.
She instead jumps straight to, Adam's not real. I was suspicious all along. Now I know.
Well, I think, it ties back to why would anybody like Kara, it ties back to the beach scene.
Yeah.
How could anybody be into Caroline?
Yeah. How could anybody who has met her like her? And
I think there's a couple other quips about it, a little less harsh.
Yeah.
I think later on,
In chapter 7, after Jessica comes to school and she's like, oh my God, you guys, you'll never believe what I found out. Like, it's Browning. Like, Adam, there's no Adam. But
right.
What Jessica's friends say is Lila says, I still don't see what you're getting so worked up about. So Adam's not a poet. He's a plagiarizer. I bet Caroline doesn't even know. And Jessica says, or maybe she knows all too well. I've always thought there was something strange about this Adam guy. I mean, how realistic is it for some fabulous romantic guy to fall head over heels in love with Caroline Pierce? When you come right down to it, it's practically science fiction.
Oh, right. That's definitely one I should have written down. The science fiction line did crack me up. I was like, wow.
It's like a good burn, but also like so mean.
I feel like it's a little, but I feel like it's too good of a burn for the character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Science fiction.
And, I mean, Caroline, I guess we should say, the way that Caroline has described Adam, he does sound, like, really sexy. He's 6'2", which is very tall for a high school boy to be. He's got this, beautiful brown hair and this chocolate brown eyes.
Yes.
He plays on the baseball team, and he lives in Cold Springs. Then she makes up another facet of it to tell her sister, which is that they met on a debate trip. So I guess Caroline's on the debate team.
Allegedly. I don't really see it. But I will say, I did write down, speaking of how handsome he was, this line, which I liked a lot. 6'2", dark brown hair, and laughing eyes.
Ooh, that's a new one.
Like, laughing eyes. He sounds lovely.
She also describes his eyes at some point as being like pools of melted chocolate.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, sexy man.
She's imaginative. We know that. I think
So
one thing we can say.
Now that definitely. Now that Jessica feels like she has one up on Caroline, rather than confronting Caroline, she's too clever for that. She's got to catch her. She's like a trapped animal. Caroline, I'm going to get her. I'm going to force her to basically be tortured. That's Jessica's MO. She is a sociopath. It seems to be what the podcast is uncovering book after book. She doesn't come off as much of a sociopath in this book as she does in some others.
Oh, really? Yeah.
You're like, I don't know.
I mean, I can kind of see it. I mean, from her sister, I think we see it a little bit from her sister's perspective, and more so later in the book, I think. But, her sister definitely is concerned about the way Jessica treats other people when she gets like that.
Yeah, it's basically like Elizabeth hated it when Jessica treated other people as her pawns in her plan, something like that alludes to repeated a pattern of behavior by Jessica. So anyway, but Jessica's move here is that she has, along with Lila and Kara, they really force Caroline's hand. They say, we have got to meet this Adam guy. Right. And Caroline's been saying like, oh, well, he can't really afford to drive down. He's got baseball games. She's got a whole list of excuses.
And we feel a little, and having not read all the books, we feel some classism at that moment. Yeah. Heavy classism when he can't afford to come. And what does say, a man who doesn't have money is not worth it or something like that?
Yeah, suddenly it's like, oh God, sorry, I guess he's not that great. And Caroline has to be like, no, I don't mind at all. Like, I don't care if he has money.
Right.
And then she says that he can't afford a bus ticket. Like, gas is expensive. And they're like, what about the bus? And she's like, well, there's a bus ticket. Lila fucking takes a bus pass out of her wallet and is like, here you go. And Kara's like, oh, I could never take anything from you, Lila. And she's like, oh, it's nothing to me, but it's everything to you. Don't you want to see Adam?
Right.
And she's like, you know, in fact, actually, I keep on alluding to book 16, but it's interesting because that book was very much about sort of classism and how much power the wealthy wielded over everybody else in town. And that was a theme that we kind of teased out of the book. That wasn't really what the book was, quote unquote, about. But that's happening here too. Lila is able to force Caroline's hand because it's not just that she's saying, bring Adam down. She's saying, we are going to throw a party in Adam's honor, in your honor. And only somebody like really ridiculously wealthy could do that so casually. Right.
And I even think, you know, when they start pressing her at the cafe or whatever, or the diner, because she's, Caroline's there drinking a milkshake.
Oh, they're at their Pi Beta Alpha meeting. Yeah, Casey's place. Yeah, they have a sorority.
There's high school sororities in Sweet Valley. It's cool. But yeah, when they start pressing, and before this bus ticket thing, it's, Jessica says, you've got to see him sometime, unless maybe you have no intention of seeing him at all.
Yeah. She's really kind of like...
She's really, really pushing her.
Coming very close to showing her hand, but like not really... and poor Caroline is in this mental space where it's like she really would love for Adam to be real. So all these reminders that Adam is made up and that she's going to have to give up Adam, her like fantasy, are really sad for her. But so she like kind of stops. She even stops writing herself these fake letters because I think she just sees that the jig is up and she's sort of like, well, she tells them that she's going to go to Cold Springs, right?
Right.
And she has this t-shirt that her cousin gave her from like an ex-boyfriend that went to Cold Springs that she has never worn. And it's like a baseball jersey from the Cold Springs high school. But she's like, that's not enough to really sell it, that I went to Cold Springs. So do you remember what she does?
For her Cold Springs trip? Yeah, she gets a Cold Springs Athletic Club t-shirt.
Right. That's the one that was like her cousin's like ex-boyfriend or something.
Yeah, something really random.
And to really send it home, she like breaks into the Oracle, like the high school newspaper office, and like finds newspapers from like the local high schools, which she knows that they keep there. And she like roots around until she finds where they're kept. Pulls out a recent Cold Springs high school paper and like finds a sports photo, not even of the right sport. It's basketball with like a blurry guy in the background, and then tucks it into the next letter that she writes from Adam that she is like, she carries them around with her everywhere so she can always whip them out and read them, and like lets the newspaper clipping like flutter to the desk so that the girls will be like, oh, what's that?
And I like this, and I remembered reading this because I thought it was funny. It was a long shot, but a few weeks earlier, she'd overheard Penny Ayala. Ayala?
I say Ayala.
Ayala, the editor of the school paper, complaining about all the space the old newspapers took up.
Yeah, how convenient.
From all other schools. Yeah, like, hey.
Well, there's a lot of things that are convenient. The fact that they're both Barrett Browning focused things between Elizabeth and Caroline is pretty convenient. But... We'll let it slide.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're obviously letting slide the catalyst in the story too, which is this mysterious dark Xerox pulled out of a garbage can by a dog, Which I want to like bring back up, like, nobody has a dog. What is a photocopy of this letter? Yeah. Like, why would you photocopy it? So all I could think is this a fax? But even a fax, what would
it's like Mrs. Wakefield photocopied the letter, then threw away the photocopy of the letter.
Right.
So maybe that's why they say it's a dark photocopy, because they're trying to cover their asses. Like, this photocopy was not good enough quality, so she threw it away and did another photocopy.
Yeah. Like, I really would... Yeah, was she trying to frame it? What was going on there?
I don't know.
She was so proud, but then she decided, what if my daughters see this? I better throw away this knows? Photocopy. I mean, I don't understand why it couldn't have been a letter, but I guess it's not as like dark and mysterious as
I don't understand.
Photocopy.
I don't understand why that exists. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around a time when you would respond to a job offer like this by writing a letter, but it was the 80s.
I mean, they did have a phone. They did have phones back then. They did have
phones, yeah. So around this point, a complication arises for Caroline, which is that Jessica kind of forces Caroline and Elizabeth together and lets out the secret that she knows that Adam's poems are at the very least plagiarized from Browning. And Jessica doesn't think Adam exists, but when Elizabeth hears this, she thinks like, oh, poor Caroline, she probably doesn't know that he copied the poems. But Caroline is like, oh no, I knew, but it's okay. But when Caroline finds out that Elizabeth's play is going to be read in front of the whole school, she has to confide in Elizabeth. She's just like, I have this terrible secret. I have to tell somebody. Well, in these books, Elizabeth is often the person that people tell their terrible secrets.
Well, I think she even says, because she knows Elizabeth is apparently honest enough that she won't, she's, maybe the opposite of Caroline, where she won't gossip.
Yeah, right. And
which isn't true, actually. She does tell someone.
She does. That's true. And they don't make any fuss about it at all. But we'll get to that. So Caroline tells Elizabeth that she made up Adam. That Adam is fictional. And Elizabeth is shocked. Elizabeth, though, finds out that Jessica kind of knows all of this already. So in chapter 12... Elizabeth finds out about Jessica's plan, which is basically to kind of entrap Caroline. And I highlighted this part too. Elizabeth comes home from talking to Caroline about Adam being real, but Adam not being real. And she wants to talk to Jessica about Lila's party. Like, kind of what's really going on here? Lila's having this party in honor of Adam. Like, what's that all about? Like, maybe she's going to talk them out of having the party at all in a kind of a delicate way without letting out Caroline's secret. But here's where she finds out Jessica's real plan. Jessica says, I don't think he exists. He meaning Adam. I think Caroline made him up. And you still invited him to a party? Elizabeth cried. Lila did the inviting, not me. Though I may have pushed a bit. It's the only way we're going to know for sure about Adam. Lila still believes he's real, but I'm more convinced than ever that he's not. It's going to be fun to see how Caroline gets out of this one. Jessica's voice was full of mischief. Jessica Wakefield, you're awful. If you're so sure Adam's a fake, why don't you come right out and say so to Caroline? That would spoil all the fun, Jessica said, giggling. Caroline has it coming to her anyway. I can't believe she tried to trick us. I'll admit it shows she got more imagination than I ever gave her credit for. But that's about all. And if I came right out and called her bluff, that would be the end of it. No, she deserves a lesson, one that has to be taught in public, for everyone to see.
Dun, dun, dun.
Jessica's done it again, Elizabeth thought. As much as she loved her sister, she couldn't stand this malicious streak in her. Elizabeth hated to see anyone cornered like this, even someone as hard to like as Caroline. That was the line you were trying to remember. We were both trying to remember earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now Elizabeth kind of feels for Caroline a little bit because she's caught in Jessica's clutches. And Elizabeth agrees to not read the play in front of everybody because then it would be more embarrassing for Caroline because people would know about the similarity.
Well, I think, Elizabeth doesn't agree, but she's seriously considering it, right? So she half-heartedly agrees to not perform this play because she doesn't want to embarrass Caroline.
Yeah, and then at some point, Caroline comes out and tells Anita the truth about Adam as well. And they have this long heart-to-heart about how Caroline is a horrible gossip and she needs to stop. And Caroline's finally ready to listen.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a long conversation. It sort of just skips over to the end.
Yeah.
Like,
or conversation.
Sounds like Anita berating her for hours, but I feel like she takes it pretty well. Yeah. Like, oh, I am a terrible gossip and maybe I should be human to people.
I think I'm finally ready to change. Yeah. It's not a conversation. It's a lecture. But it's a much needed lecture that Caroline's finally ready to hear. We get it glossed over. But Anita, to her credit, is still like really willing to help Caroline put her best foot forward. Like she sees that her sister is ready to have a personality and is gonna like help push her in that direction. And Caroline, I believe it's on the heels of this sort of newfound confidence that she tells Elizabeth that, you know what, please do your reading. I wouldn't want to ask you not to do it. And Elizabeth's like, really? You sure? So Caroline's big-heartedness pushes Elizabeth over the edge of thinking about doing something generous for Caroline, which is that she's going to get Todd to kind of help in a mysterious way that we don't hear about, but we'll find out how with this whole Caroline situation.
Todd can't believe, right, that Elizabeth likes Caroline now. Yeah. After this one moment of apparently Caroline being like doing one good thing. So Todd can't believe it. In fact, he says, something must have happened for you to say that. And she says, I think something has, Todd. I think this whole experience has made Caroline realize you can't win friends by deception.
And there's the moral. Caroline might not be the most likable person in the world, but that's because she's been going about everything the wrong way. Basically, she's like everyone else. She deserves some happiness too. That's like from that same conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Elizabeth really convinces Todd to help her out when she says that she just can't let Jessica get away with something. Todd and Jessica have no love lost. So anytime Elizabeth is actually willing to help Jessica get her comeuppance, Todd like has a total boner for that.
Yeah, right. And Todd and Elizabeth both have a boner for it. And and, he asked her if you really want to get her out of this situation. And, Elizabeth's sure. And she says, it would just kill Jessica.
That's and you can see Todd's eyes light up. He's like drooling basically at the idea of like he and Elizabeth taking Jessica down together. Right. So, he's been waiting for this for 17 books.
Right. And I think it's interesting too, just this idea of like I think Elizabeth's like the most rounded character, right? Where she's like, I love my sister, but she's kind of this crazy vindictive person, and so I want to spoil her fun.
She's much more well-rounded.
Destroy this, Caroline.
She's much more well-rounded in this book than she has been in most of the previous books in that respect. Because she's defended Jessica a lot in past books. Like she just doesn't want to hear anything bad said about her sister, even though she knows that what she's doing is bad. But it almost seems for once like the consequences of previous books are kind of building up for Elizabeth, and she's kind of sick of seeing Jessica get away with this cruel behavior. So at any rate, at this point in the story, we're almost through to the climax. Caroline has agreed to kind of tell the mean girls about Adam being fake, but instead she kind of chickens out and just tells them that the poems are plagiarized. Right. Which just doesn't seem like much of a reveal at this point. Everybody knows that. Yeah. And
but that's her game. Yeah. It's like, pretending like she doesn't know that they know, which is very obvious, so I don't...
And she's kind of trying to save face before Elizabeth's play is read in front of the whole school, which it then is, and that goes great. And then...
Elizabeth is apparently just very talented and well-rounded.
Yeah. One woman's romance is the talk of the town. And then we have the party at Lila's house in Caroline and Adam's honor. We find out, as a side note, in the last book, we found out that the Patmans had an Olympic-sized swimming pool in their backyard, which seemed fucking insane because that is a huge swimming pool that no one should have in their backyard. And certainly it's not like a poolside party kind of a thing. In this book, we find out the Fowlers have an Olympic-sized swimming pool, too.
Apparently everyone does. I think Sweet Valley High is it's just a lot of money there. It's a very important tourist destination. Very wealthy.
Sweet Valley,
very
California,
affluent. Yeah. Like, I feel like if you grew up there, you can become president or whatever. Your social status is going to go far. I mean, had they moved to San Francisco, people, I'm sure, would have been, you're from Sweet Valley. Like, oh my God. Yeah. That is amazing.
Well, they go to this party and next to the Fowler's poolside, next to the Fowler's little beside swimming pool, which again, picture that. It seems like the pool would dwarf the party. And Caroline looks very beautiful. Her sister has helped her do her hair and pick out a beautiful dress.
Right. And we should say the second makeover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Because her sister originally gave her a haircut, right?
Yeah. And picked out a scoop neck t-shirt for her.
Yeah, which apparently is high fashion. I mean,
well, it was weird. It was like Caroline only wore buttoned-up shirts buttoned all the way up to her neck, and she felt very weird.
Which I think relates to the cover. Going back to the cover of the book, we see, and I don't know if we said this, they're both wearing buttoned-up scoop neck.
They are wearing not scoop neck, like Oxford shirts,
buttoned-up Oxford-style shirts. Yeah.
Like yellow Oxford shirts buttoned up all the way. They're wearing like the same shirt.
So, which made me think is there a school uniform? And so she was rebelling by wearing this scoop neck shirt.
Elizabeth and Caroline on the cover are both wearing this shirt, it seems. We can't really see the color of Elizabeth's shirt, so I guess it could just be like a sweater that's more Elizabeth style, but...
I don't know, look at the cuffs. They look very similar.
Yeah, that's true. How weird. Maybe it's a long sleeve t-shirt. I don't know. But at any rate, so Caroline's had a bit of a style change and she looks pretty apparently now. And she's like steeled herself to go in alone. And she goes into the party by herself and she, basically is prepared. Like she has a newfound confidence and she's like, you know what? I'm going to make an announcement to everybody. I'm going to tell them that my boyfriend that everybody knows about, that they're all here to celebrate, Adam, is completely fictional. And this is the rom-com climax of this book. This really, really very delightful, sort of silly, frothy book. And I was hoping, Jeremy, that you would agree to perform this scene with me. If you could perform the role of the gentleman in this scene.
The gentleman caller?
Yes. We're going to reveal the surprise to our listeners the way that it was revealed to us as we read the book. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Was that the listeners?
Yeah, that was one listener. Yeah.
Oh, thanks a lot.
I mean, I'm sure there was others. That was the one I heard.
Okay. But are you, Jeremy Shattuck, ready? Are you ready?
I, Jeremy Shattuck, am ready.
Okay.
I think.
Still holding her head up, the petrified girl stood alone before her classmates. Their eyes stared back at her in anticipation, and at that moment, Caroline knew the meaning of the word fear. Those eyes were demanding, accusing, and getting increasingly impatient with each passing second. She had to get this over with, if for no other reason than to get those eyes off her. "Thanks for coming tonight," she began. "I know you all came here to meet the boy I've been telling you so much about, but he..."
"Caroline!"
A boy's voice cut through the words, and she was struck mute as a tall, friendly-looking boy rushed up and gave her a big hug.
"Sorry I'm late. I hope you'll forgive me."
Caroline felt like shouting, "Who are you?" But the boy quieted the impulse with a kiss.
"Tell them who I am,"
he whispered while their lips were still pressed together.
Yeah, that's... Wait, excuse me. Tell them who I am.
She regained her composure quickly. Without even thinking about it, she announced, "As I was saying, everybody, here's Adam." "That's him?" Jessica's jaw dropped. "Of course, dummy," Lila said smugly. "He looks just like his picture, don't you think?"
Which is, I think, going back, it's important to mention that it was a blurry
picture from the basketball game. The boy did fit the description Caroline had painted. 6'2", dark hair, with a strong muscular build. His features weren't quite up to pin-up quality, but Caroline could be forgiven for that exaggeration. By anyone's standards, he was a winner. I just don't believe it, Jessica said, slumping into the nearest chair. She must have pulled him out of a hat. Come on, Jess, face it. When you're wrong, Lila smiled. I knew all along he'd show up. She watched as he took Caroline's arm and walked her toward the pool. Caroline is some lucky girl. Once she was sure they were out of earshot, Caroline stopped and looked up at her savior. Who are you? She asked.
Adam,
he said. Please don't joke with me. I'm serious. He smiled.
I was told that's who I was supposed to be. Actually, my name's Jerry Fisher. I'm a friend of Todd Wilkins.
So I could go on because the scene goes on from there and it's beautiful. Todd asked his friend Jerry to come pretend to be Adam, and it's all just amazing. And Caroline comes clean, actually, later on. She decides, you know what, Jerry, you're great, but you're not Adam, and they're going to be expecting me to have Adam, and I can't continue this ruse. And so she gets up and tells everybody, this guy's not Adam. Adam's right. Made up.
When I feel like this is the first real moment, I don't know, after this journey of Caroline, that she also feels bad that she's making him play someone he's not.
Yeah, and she really likes Jerry. And Jerry is like dreamboat.
What's not to love about Jerry? I mean,
he showed up. They've already described him
6'2",
as
6'2", dark hair with a strong muscular build. I think, by anyone's standard, he was a winner. I don't know, but I feel like maybe that's for Caroline.
For Caroline, yeah.
A guy showed up. He's obviously, he's a winner.
I was tripping over my tongue a little bit, but what I was trying to say was that the book has already described him as her savior. Like, she was looking up at her savior.
Right.
And then he, dances her over to Liz and Todd. Later on, Lila tries to dance with him, and he tells Lila that he's a one-woman guy. This is all still as Adam. And Caroline, maybe feeling more comfortable being herself, is kind of this new personality girl with Jerry. And that's when she's just like, he's his own cool guy. I like that guy. I can't keep up this ruse. And after she comes back to Jerry, he's after she's confessed to everybody that he's not Adam, she runs off. But does Jerry come find her? And he's like, I'm really proud of you, Caroline.
Right. And he holds her teary face, I believe.
Yeah. It's very romantic.
This is the build up of all of her romance poems. Here you have her, I think, blurry. What did she say? I couldn't see because I was crying, running into the darkness. And here comes Jerry. The hero.
Well, it's all very romantic. It's a little bit too good to be true, but well, in a way, this is better than if Adam had really come to life, because Jerry is real and he saved her day in a way that no Adam ever could.
It's true.
He's the dream man. Speaking of which, I guess I should say that he's the dream boy, because this is the part of the podcast where we talk about boys.
I just wanted to add really quick, he doesn't write poetry, though. So I think it's not going to last. He says specifically that
he doesn't like poetry. He does say that.
So I think they're doomed.
Yeah, but beyond the poetry thing, a dream man. Or should I say dream boy?
Dream boy. Wait. A dream boy.
Oh my goodness, Jeremy.
Beautiful boys. I'm in danger of losing my head.
Everything ends up great for Caroline. We've heard about Todd. Any other boys in this book that caught your fancy?
Oh, yeah. We got Todd, Bruce, Jerry.
Oh, let's talk about Bruce. Yeah. We haven't talked about Bruce at all.
Yeah, I'm very curious. Bruce, there is a side plot which is, building through this book of Bruce.
Yeah, let's talk about him.
Who is apparently, from what I gleaned from the book, a player.
Yeah, and he's got his eyes on a new prize.
Oh, yeah. He definitely does. What's her name?
Her name is Regina Morrow. And she was recently on the cover of Ingenue magazine.
Very important. If you're Canadian, it's Regina. So. Well, saying she might be Canadian, so...
Regina was recently on the cover of Ingenue magazine, which is, I think, what caught Bruce's attention, because he comes up to Regina at one point and is like, I read all about you in this article, and it really caught my attention. And he says the funniest thing to her. Hey, Bruce said, suddenly, leaning back in his chair. That article said you like fast cars. Have you ever driven in a Porsche?
All right.
Yes. Regina smiled. I'm sorry, it's Bruce Patman would say Porsche, I think. So we're going to go ahead and say it like that. Have you ever driven in a Porsche? Regina smiled. Bruce looked so nervous, she felt flattered. No, I haven't, she told him. Why do you ask? Regina was enjoying Bruce's embarrassment too much to let him off lightly. Well, I have one, he told her, clearing his throat again. I don't suppose you'd like to go for a ride in it sometime. As a passenger or a driver, Regina teased him. Bruce blushed. Whichever you prefer, he said awkwardly. Bruce had never met a girl who was so obviously unflustered by his advances, and he didn't know quite what to say.
Besides people's impressions of Bruce in this book, Bruce talking about his Porsche, I think, is a funny scene because he doesn't seem like this sleazy player that is kind of, obviously what people think. Or it's definitely alluded to. He's probably slept with a lot of people at the school,
yeah, that would never be stated outright.
Not outright, but it's in the subtext, absolutely, that he is maybe slept with all these sorority sisters.
He also famously hangs out with a lot of college girls.
Oh, see, But I also find that fascinating for someone who's, unless it's all a ploy, he seems pretty awkward to be this big player that people say he is. But they also say in this book that there's not very many men, so on
that's
the beach.
Bullshit, though, because there's so many boys in this book alone. So, these bitches are sitting on the beach complaining about how there are not enough boys. But among the boys that they've rejected in this book, Dennis Creighton makes an appearance. Listeners might remember him from... There's a book where Jessica is an intern at her dad's office, and she starts up a fling with this boy who works there, Dennis Creighton, and then she finds out he's 15. And she drops him.
Is that when she's a junior?
She's 16 in all of these books forever. Okay. So she's only a year older than him. But, she would never dream of dating a younger man. Mm-hmm. So she's grossed out when she sees Dennis Creighton again, even though he's, for some reason, happy to see her. This is when she visits her dad at her office.
Okay.
Another fellow that is mentioned in this book, hilariously, is a guy named John Pfeiffer. John Pfeiffer... is brought up in the same scene when the girls are complaining about how there are no boys in town. And that scene goes a little bit like this. Lila turned over on her back. John Pfeiffer's not so bad. Sure, if you're a football, Kara grumbled. Sorry, it just makes me laugh.
I forgot. Yeah. No, that was a good quip. I forgot about that.
He's so into being Mr. Ace sports editor, he probably doesn't have time for girls. I don't know, Jessica said. Liz spends as much time on the Oracle as John does, and take my word for it, she has plenty of time for Todd. But John's strictly a sidelines guy, Kara continued. He likes to watch the action, not get involved.
Ooh.
Which I thought was a delicious bit of double entendre.
Yeah. There's a little. There's some subtext there.
Yep. They're coming up with new creative ways to not say the word sex.
Absolutely.
And right before that, actually, Ricky Capaldo, who we haven't heard about since book 10, really gets mentioned.
Ricky Capaldo, who is the boy who is also the actor.
Bill Chase, yes.
We totally forgot about him. Because he does have, I'm sure it'll come up later, but, very minor role in apparently dropping out of the play competition.
Yeah, so Bill Chase is this big actor, and he's...
he's going places.
He's going places, yeah. He's got an audition.
Right.
And Caroline sees him talking to Mr. Jaworski, who's in charge of the play competition. Once again, listeners, no Mr. Collins in this book.
Who's that? Is Mr. Collins?
See, poor Jeremy doesn't even know who Mr. Collins is. He's the sexy English teacher. He's been missing in action. I don't know where he is.
But they mentioned the other English teacher.
Mr. Jaworski is here now, and he So Caroline sees Bill talking to Mr. Jaworski, and she thinks that maybe he's getting like illegal advice, like illegal in the competition advice about the play.
Coached on his play.
She confronts Bill Chase about it, or like asks him, and he's like, she says something so awkward, like, "Oh, is that what you were talking to Mr. Jaworski about in the hall earlier?" And Bill's like, "Hey, why are you spying on me?"
Like one of those the forced scenes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, why are you asking me these questions about? Yeah. Obviously, they're not even whether they're acquaintances.
Well, it gives you a glimpse into how awkward Caroline is as a person. That she has nothing to talk about. Even in this scene, she's not trying to start shit. She just is like, "Oh, there's Bill Chase. I saw him talking to person A. I saw him doing thing B, and I'm going to report those things to him as if he has any idea that I was aware of them. Like, we've never talked about them before." It's very weird. And I can relate to this a little bit because sometimes I will remember things that somebody told me and like repeat them back. Like, "Oh, I remember that you grew up in Boise." And they'll be like, "Why do you remember that?" And like really weirded out. Like I'm somehow like paying too close attention.
You're creating gossip. I mean, obviously.
And this is way worse than that. To like, they weren't even together in this situation. She was just observing from afar that he was talking to Mr. Jaworski. And he's defensive because it turns out that he was actually getting some plays from Mr. Jaworski to like practice different audition pieces for some TV or movie audition.
So there's Mr.
Jaworski.
I think I've heard this story a lot of times before, and he has this big audition, and he's going to go to Los Angeles to, be in a TV show. Like, he's made it. He's got this role, apparently, that could lead to a television series. I've just heard this story so many times, and it's obvious he's going into porn. I mean, that's what's going to happen. Is this poor kid, another Sweet Valley victim. So when you say lost to the big city.
When you say we're going to hear more about this later, you're thinking like book 20, 21 is like Bill Chase's big, I'm sure it'll sexy choice.
Yeah, it'll be vague. He'll be like, "Yeah, I'm in these films. They're really great. Oh, but we haven't seen those."
Like, "Oh, they're art films." Yeah. You wouldn't know. They only show at special art theaters.
Is this going to be a separate book of will he make it successfully in Hollywood or be defeated? And
maybe. We'll have to wait and see.
A beautiful boys, a beautiful boys, a beautiful boys.
So, Jeremy, at this important juncture, I must ask you the question I ask every guest, which is, are you a Jessica or an Elizabeth?
It depends in what way. Like, who do I want to hang out with, or do I want to see survive this? Survive Sweet Valley? Mm-hmm. Well, I think probably, more fun to hang out with would be Jessica. She seemed like she's a little bit kooky, crazy, live wire. Mm-hmm. Where Elizabeth seems very well-rounded. I'm sure her and her boyfriend, Todd, are going to have 5 kids after she graduates high school. I mean, which, of course, never happens in the books, I'm sure. But,
no, they never get out of junior year.
But...
Not in this series,
I see them staying in Sweet Valley for at least 3 more generations.
Like the Wingfield parents.
She probably becomes, the new English professor, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. The new Mr. Collins. I like that.
I'm not sure what Todd does, because I know enough about him, except that he doesn't like Jessica very much.
He could be the basketball coach.
There you go. He is very sporty, right?
Or maybe like a used car salesman.
Yeah.
At the Datsun lot. Todd's Datsun does not appear in this book, but he does drive a Datsun that gets I think Todd might be one of the people that doesn't have a lot of money, actually.
Datsun, because all these other people are driving Porsches and God knows what.
Yeah, Ferraris.
I think that goes, why she wasn't that impressed by his Porsche is because a Porsche? Everyone has a Porsche.
Well, the Morrows are also super rich, so they actually... I have a really hard time believing that Virginia has never been in a Porsche, but...
well, maybe she's only been in nicer cars.
Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, in fact, for letting me join you here at this... in this lovely room.
Yeah.
And
welcome to Venice, California, where I'm a guest.
We're both guests. But I want to say, listeners, thank you for listening. Thanks to Jocelyn Schofield for the use of the song Beautiful Boys. Please find Sweet Valley Diaries on iTunes/Apple Podcasts. Leave me a nice 5-star review. I have gotten a couple of new reviews in the past month or so, and they're so great. It really is very touching and motivating, just to be totally honest, to read nice words. And I don't have a ton of ratings yet, so everyone helps, whether or not you take the time to write a review. And tell a friend and send me a letter. I love getting letters about your own Sweet Valley stories or whatever it is that you want to tell me. And I can maybe read it on a future podcast episode.
Best if it's written on a typewriter, I think, thematically.
Oh, yeah. Mail me a typewritten letter. Or just typewrite a letter, scan it, and email it to sweetvalleydiaries@me.com. And, I think that's about it. Thanks a lot, Jeremy.
You're very welcome. It was fun.
All right.
I'll grab the beer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That way we don't have to
Give me
shuffle.
One too.
Yeah, I can just bring them. I'll just grab them.
You can bring them all?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy.